Every time you remove an individual from that population, you've changed the dynamics in some way.
From your perspective, is there such thing as a cull buck on any property, especially free-range properties?
I don't believe there is. If that deer's going to put a smile on your face, shoot it. Don't apologize for it. Don't make an excuse for it. Don't do whatever it is. Shoot it. If that deer is the one that's going to make you happy, then shoot it.
This is Deer and Deer Hunting TV.
This is where it all begins.
My best hunting day ever. This is Deer and Deer Hunting TV. So this topic of cull bucks or management bucks is really popular among deer hunters these days. Let's define it first. People like to think that there's a certain level of deer that is inferior somehow and it should be taken off the landscape to improve genetics. When we look at this, most times, this conversation has transcended that somehow inferior deer exist and should be taken off to manage for bigger bucks. What it comes down to is an excuse, usually. People want an excuse to shoot a deer, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when we're looking at it from a scientific standpoint, the word cull and the word management really don't come into play when you're talking about free-range whitetails.
And there's no better source to learn about the scientific opinion on cull bucks than heading to Auburn, Alabama, and having a chat with Dr. Stephen Ditchkoff of the Auburn University Deer Lab. So that's exactly what Dan did.
All right, Steve, so we've talked about this a lot over the years. It's been popularized on TV for years.
Yep.
I think it's been used as a crutch. But from your perspective, is there such thing as a cull buck on any property, especially free-range properties?
I don't believe there is. I believe the cull buck came, as you said, out of television. I think it's no different than we used to call a flight attendant a stewardess. I think we've just made it, a cull buck is now a management buck, makes it more acceptable. And it comes from the philosophy that we need to go out there and remove that individual to make room for others. That's never going to be a trophy, so that animal is of zero to little value. Let's get it off the property and make room for others. Outside of high fences, I don't believe cull bucks exist. There is a value to every individual that's out there, I believe. You'll see an antler, you'll see a buck that has 4 or 5 points on one side and just a spike on the other, that someone will call it, well, that's a cull buck, that's a managed buck. We need to remove that one. That buck may not have trophy value in terms of book trophy value, but that buck has value to your herd in terms of a mature individual that is improving social stability, is reducing the amount of length of your breeding season, is getting your does bred quicker, is suppressing breeding of your younger males so that they can go on and they put less effort into the breeding season, come out of the breeding season better and have larger antlers the next year. And that animal its genetics is not 5 on one side and a spike on the other. This is the genetics on the good antler. This is just a pedicle damage on the other. I believe we've taken what we've seen on TV and tried to apply it to free-range herds. What I tell my students is the only place that should be culling bucks is a place that has an overabundance of bucks. And I have yet to ever see one on free-range.
Deer and Deer Hunting is brought to you by Sig Sauer, Never Settle. Outdoor Edges, game processing sets to do it yourself and save. 10-point crossbow technologies, there is no substitute. Cuddyback, CuddyLink, 24 cameras, one cell plan, $10 per month. Walkers, protect it or lose it. And by Scent Killer Gold with Hunt Dry Technology Plus. Apply it, try it, and go hunt.
What I've always said was, you don't need an excuse. If you have your buck tag and that's a deer you want to shoot, shoot it. If it's going to make it, I have no apologies. It's going to make me feel good. I'm going to shoot that deer. I don't need an excuse to do it. But what you're saying from a scientific management perspective, there are much larger things that we should be worrying about. Give me some examples of those.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there are more important things we need to be worrying about. We tend to think of a deer herd just as a list of the bucks and the does that are out there. And we lose sight of that every time you remove an individual from that population, you've changed the dynamics in some way that's out there. This is a naturally functioning population. If we lower the age structure, they operate differently. If we raise the age structure, change the sex ratio, things are going to occur differently. Depending upon the direction we drive it, could be better, could be worse. And I think it's a natural tendency for hunters. The first step is we just go out there, we're young, we go shoot a deer. You remember your first deer, we all remember our first deer. We evolve as we learn more about management and we become managers, and we want to better manage our deer herd. And so we start to take the tools and tricks that we learn out of magazines, from television, out of books, from the internet, and we try and apply those. And one of those things is the management buck, is the cull buck. Well, they're doing that, so I need to do that. I don't think that is an important tool or something that people should be trying on their own property. I don't think it is having the success that seems to be suggested on television. I think they should be far more concerned with the condition of their herd, number one. Number two, the condition of the habitat and the nutrients available during the period of lactation. I believe it is the most overlooked aspect of white-tailed deer management, and I believe this is true across the country. Make sure that the does have the nutrients they need to maximize milk production. It's the most costly thing that any mammal does on earth is lactation. And it is critical for those fawns to get a jump start on life. Whether you're doing that with habitat management, you're doing that with herd management, you're doing it with supplements, either food plots or whatever it is, if you can maximize that, then you will reap rewards 3, 4, and 5 years down the road.
Invariably what happens is, as a land manager, you want to do all those right things and you go do it, and then for whatever reason, you might have some late-born fawns that are sublegal spikes, and it's like, oh, I messed up. I must have not provided enough. Well, no. I mean, there's a million different reasons for that to happen. You're saying don't worry about that.
We can control does. We can't control genetics. We can't, removing cull bucks is not improving our herd. But as a hunter, we can allow our bucks to age, and we can control our deer density and our doe population. Those are the two things we can really do. Anything else that we're talking about doing is Star Trek type stuff. It's really not possible. As hunters, we have incredible ability to influence the herd. As managers, we have incredible ability to influence the herd. Two different ways. As a deer hunter, obviously don't shoot those young bucks. If you're interested in larger antlered deer, don't shoot the young bucks. But what you said earlier, which I think we've lost sight of, is if that deer's going to put a smile on your face, shoot it. Don't apologize for it. Don't make an excuse for it. Don't do whatever it is. Shoot it. If that deer is the one that's going to make you happy, then shoot it.
So as you can see, there's really no such thing as a cull buck from a scientific standpoint. We need to shift this conversation and have it be about what it's really about, and that's hunting bucks, especially when you're not the landowner, hunting bucks that maybe the landowner doesn't want to hunt because we know that buck is probably not going to be that Boone and Crockett class monster that they desire. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's face it, deer hunting today is a case of the haves and have-nots. If you own the land, you control the rules. You can make those guidelines. More power to you. If you don't, you have to play by the rules of that landowner. So that's where the conversation should really be. What type of buck am I going to be allowed to hunt if I don't own that property? And if I am the property owner, what are the realistic expectations for me on growing deer? And that's where we should model our harvest strategies.
Coming up next, Steve Bartillo provides a hunting example of a property that he doesn't own, but he manages to the expectations of the landowner. That means for him, he must take out a certain amount of bucks that he projects won't live up to their expectations. This segment of Deer and Deer Hunting TV is brought to you by Hunt Stand.
So Steve's property here is one of those rare properties where you can actually cull. You know, I don't like to use that term, but you can manage the bucks that are on that property. Let's face it, you know, this guy's got 3,000 or 4,000 acres at his disposal. That's fantasy land. That's deertopia. You know, that's ideal. And if you do not manage bucks on a property that size, you're not going to be able to, you know, if you're not taking out some of those lesser individual bucks, they will establish core areas of that home range on that property. And it's going to make it really difficult. You know, a lot of times those bigger bucks, the ones that we aspire to hunt, they aren't the alphas. They might have the big headgear, but they're not the ones that are occupying the core of that range. And a lot of times you're going to have Steve's buck here, perfect example. You have a buck that beautiful buck for any one of us that's hunting in reality. You're going to have a nice, mature 8-point, maybe a 9-point, maybe even a 10-point, occupying that core range, but he is not the mega giant that you want to put your tag on, you know, that you dream about. Nothing wrong with harvesting that deer, especially in a state where you have more than one buck tag, and that's where the management comes into play, and that's why we call them management bucks. Again, very microscopic example of how it works in an ideal situation, but the take home that you can do is if you're hunting in a large cooperative of landowners, there are going to be certain bucks that you're going to want to take off that property that might not be those mega giants that you're dreaming about, but if you don't take those bucks off, it's really going to hinder your management efforts as far as having some of those much larger deer to hunt next year and the year after. So in the final analysis, stop using the definitions as excuses. Don't use the term cull somehow derogatory to say, well, that deer's inferior. You know, that's an inferior deer. It's not an inferior deer. It's a deer that within the pecking order is going to establish a core range that's going to make it difficult for you to bring in some of those bigger deer through displacement, because that's what happens with whitetails. It's no different with whitetails than it is any other animal species. You take one animal out, it gives another animal an opportunity to go into that core range, and that's what it's about. But never use it as an excuse. Don't use it as somehow like you're doing the herd a favor. You're doing this for your own benefit, hunting-wise, but you're also managing that deer herd to expectations for everybody around you.
Deer and Deer Hunting is brought to you by Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable. Banks Outdoors, where memories are born. Get armed and deadly with Easton FMJ arrows. Sever broadheads, straight through it. And by Muddy Tree Stands, serious gear for serious hunters. This segment of Deer and Deer Hunting is brought to you by the all-new Mathews V3.
So today we're talking about whether or not you should stop a deer when it gets into shooting range. Most times I'm going to say yes, try to stop that deer. If it is walking fast or if it is trotting, you definitely want to try to stop it rather than taking that shot while that deer is moving. That only makes sense. Now, if that deer is feeding, different story. You could allow that deer to stop on its own, which is always better. Its head's down, it's not alarmed or alert, it's not looking at you. And a lot of times when you do get them to stop, they invariably will shift and look up at you. And when they shift, that scapula almost always is covering the vitals. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, let's go to Mark Kaiser and see how he does it.
Another option to get deer to stop in a specific area, a shooting lane, is to use a misting spray. Now this is Wildlife Research Center, their Golden Doe Premium Doe Urine. It's not an estrus set, it's just a doe urine, so it's more of just a curiosity scent. What I do is I got my stand over, about 150 yards over there, and I know the deer like to travel here as well as a couple other spots. So I take this golden doe, and it's misting, so I'm misting that urine right along this trail that comes through here, and when the deer hit that area, they're gonna stop and pause. And that provides me with a standing shot at the deer I want. Now I'm rifle hunting, so when they pause right here, I've got a nice shooting lane through all this brush, and I can make a broadside shot. The same factor works great if you're tree stand hunting. Say you got your tree stand right up here, this is the same travel route, try to just spray it right at nose level where the deer are going to be passing by with their nose, and they're gonna stop. When their attention is drawn down, you're gonna be up there and have a clean opportunity to draw back your bow and get a shot.
A lot of questions we get all the time are, what broadhead should I shoot? You know, Sever offers a few different broadheads for pretty much any number of bow hunter. We have our 1.5 to our 2.0, we even have our new 2.0 Robusto broadhead, and all of them have different purpose in mind. Our most popular head would be our 2.0 titanium. The 2.0 titanium head is designed primarily for whitetail deer hunting. We call it a big cut broadhead. It's primarily designed to put a large entry hole in the animals, perfect broadhead for a white-tailed deer and their body size. It's going to be designed to put as big of a hole as possible in the animal, so it's going to promote a lot of blood loss, so you're going to be able to really get as much blood on the ground as possible to help track that animal and find that deer. Now, sometimes certain people are going to have different situations, either in their bow setup type or just their physical limits that might preclude them from wanting to shoot the 2.0. So we make our titanium 1.5. Now, It's designed for maximum penetration, unlike the 2.0, which is designed for big cuts. So why would somebody hunting deer want to use a 1.5? Okay, well, let me explain. Anyone that's going to be concerned about wanting more penetration, either due to a low draw weight or a shorter draw length, or maybe you're hunting a bigger animal, you know, not just deer hunting, you're hunting moose or you're hunting elk or something like that, the 1.5 is going to be better suited for that type of a shooter. Also, there's a lot of shooters that are just coming from fixed blades or have always shot fixed blades and prefer fixed blades. Keep in mind, a fixed blade will always out-penetrate a mechanical, but there's a lot of fixed blade shooters now that are shooting longer ranges and want to be able to throw a mechanical into their mix. One of the beauties about Sever is they fly so accurate. You can take a single Sever broadhead, put it in the back of the quiver. Maybe you do prefer fixed blades, but you can put one Sever in the quiver for longer shots if that's the type of shooter you are. So it's really a versatile setup for really any type of bow hunter that's out there.